Hi everyone, Aaron here once again. With this video, we're going to start exploring interviews. Here we are, one of the final steps towards landing a job, in the interview phase. Take a second and pat yourself on the back because you have beat great odds to get here. Normally, an employer narrows down the field by around 80% at this point, and you survive the calling. This deserves a moment of well-deserved self-congratulations. Now, let's bring it home. The rest of this video will focus on interview tips, but it would be irresponsible to not take a second to address the pandemic-riddled elephant in the room. So how can COVID affect the interview process? Well, for starters, there will probably be an uptick of interviews being conducted over Zoom, Skype, Microsoft Teams, and other video messaging apps. A lot of the upcoming tips carry over to these scenarios and can be adapted when appropriate. Of course, it's always tempting to only worry about dressing the top half of yourself and wearing gym shorts or PJs in this situation. But I fully believe if you want to be in the right mindset, treat this like an in-person interview. Dress accordingly, head to toe. But what if the interview is in person? Of course, you'll want to take appropriate safety measures such as wearing your mask and avoiding handshakes. If you're truly concerned about going to an in-person meeting, see if they're open to a video interview instead. Let's get back to our original programming. Besides just being a way to torture introverts, what purpose does an interview serve? First off, it's a formal meeting to test your social skills. Also, the interviews can help employers answer any lingering questions directly. One prominent question is, are you a good fit for our team? They want to know if you can get along and work well with the managers, supervisors, coworkers, and clients. I mentioned previously that the cover letter is sometimes viewed as a sneak peek at your personality. In the interview, it's on full display. So as you prepare for the interview, practice giving answers, think about the things you want to get across, and always make sure this serves as a display of who you are professionally. One of the major ideas I want to explore with this video is that the event of the interview is more than just the interview itself. It helps to think of this as having multiple stages with a before, during, and after stage. So, of course, let's look at this process chronologically, starting with the before stage. The before stage checklist has more individual tasks than the other stages. Take a few seconds to pause the video and check out the list on the screen. The first item on the list, and arguably the most important, is conducting research and preparing for questions. If you haven't already done so, you need to conduct a deep dive research session into the company. I'm talking about exploring the company beyond its About Us section. Here you'll want to research the company's mission statements, main products/services, look at their social media presence on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and search for the company in national, regional, or local news sites. Also, Glassdoor is a great way to review a company from current and former employees' perspectives. The point of all this is to get an idea of their work environment, work culture, and how they view their employees. This research can also help in crafting your own questions for the interviewer. We'll focus more on questions you'll need to prep for in the next interview video. For now, let's jump a little in the future and say you've prepped some answers for possible questions. Now would be the time to practice actually speaking these out loud. You don't have to get to the point where your delivery is cold and robotic through repetitive practice, but you want to make sure you sound comfortable and confident. You can have a friend help you practice by having them act as an interviewer and give you questions, or you could record yourself answering questions out loud, or if that doesn't work for you, you can always practice in front of a mirror and watch your biolanguage. Speaking of which, let's talk about biolanguage. In the past, you might have heard about the 55-38-7 communication formula. This posits that all communication is comprised of 55% biolanguage, 38% tone of voice, and only 7% is actual content of what you're saying. In truth, it's impossible to apply this exact formula universally to all conversations between people due to an overwhelming amount of other factors that can be involved. However, what we can take away from this is that it's important that we be aware of our biolanguage and tone of voice in an interview setting while still putting thought and care into our actual answers. So, Speak clearly and enunciate. Don't use your hands too much when you're talking. Watch your leg if you're a thumper. Maintain eye contact for most of the meeting, especially when you're talking to someone. Finally, watch your fidgeting. Some of these physical mannerisms are accepted in a casual encounter, but in a professional setting, you'll want to present a more professional version of yourself. Now let's talk about the interview itself. There's an old saying floating out there in the zeitgeist that goes, to be on time is to be late, to be early is to be on time. Essentially, don't arrive at 9 a.m. for a 9 a.m. appointment. Always be early for an interview. But how early? There's such a thing as being too early. I suggest checking in about 10 to 15 minutes before an interview. And that's checking in with someone, and not just arriving at the location. When you actually enter into the main room, there are a few different types of interviews you'll encounter. However, the most common one is the one where you're either interviewed by an individual person or a group of people. The format employs straightforward Q&A sessions. The interviewer asks a question, then you answer. At the end, you'll have an opportunity to ask your own questions. Now, don't think of this as a strict back and forth. Every question is a potential trigger for a conversation or your own questions. Remember, you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. Now, let's run down some additional tips for the interview. First, make sure you maintain eye contact while you're speaking and while you're being spoken to. If you're being interviewed by multiple people, fluctuate back and forth. Make sure everyone feels included when you're talking. Number 2, wait for them to offer a seat. Don't automatically take one. Number 3, if you're being interviewed by multiple people, make sure to initially address each person at the beginning of the interview. Number 4, when everyone sits down, make sure to offer copies of your resume to anyone who needs it. And finally, number 5, make sure to always ask, what are the next steps at the end of the interview? Now let's discuss what happens after the interview. Before you leave the interview, make sure you grab the business cards from all the interviewers, if possible. If not, make sure you have their names and titles. You'll need those for thank you letters. Thank you letters or cards are a beneficial task that can only help your chances. You'll want to send these out within a week from the interview. It's not an employer-imposed requirement for job seekers. People have been hired without sending them. But it's seen as a professional courtesy, a nice little thank you to people who took time out of their busy schedules to meet with you. The way it helps you is by reminding the interviewer or interviewers that you are a candidate for the job. This often encourages them to review your application materials again. Several HR staff members I've talked to in the past have confirmed this. Like a teenager navigating the battlefield of young love, some people wonder if they should call. It depends on the situation. If they give a specific date of when to expect a call and it's past said date, you can certainly call them at that point. But give them a grace period. Wait at least 2 full business days before you decide to call them. People get wrapped up in work and deadlines get extended sometimes. Of course, if you're told no phone calls, then no phone calls. And that's it for interviews part 1. Be on the lookout for part 2, where we will focus more on questions and appropriate interview attire. Once again, we have a variety of resources awaiting you. We have BrainFuse Job Now, a website portal for all of your job search needs. There is also the EVPL Central Reference Desk if you need assistance with research. Finally, you can book a librarian for one-on-one assistance for various things. As always, take care of yourselves and be safe out there. I'll see you next time.